Hello, everybody. How are y'all doing? Good to see you all here. We've got a little crowd joining us online. Ooh, good number of people. Great. Well, let's jump in. This is going to be a really interesting episode of Adobe Live. All right. So let's first talk about who we are. My name is Kylee Pena, and I'm a principal product marketing manager for Premiere. I work on pro editorial. My background is I spent about 10 years as an editor, mostly on reality, corporate, documentary, things like that. And then I went into workflow technology at Netflix, workflow technology, working directly on shows like Jane the Virgin, Scorpion in dailies, and then moved into Adobe so I could get my hands on a product again. And then, how about you?
I have been at Adobe for, let's see, about a little over 3 years. And I work on the Premiere Pro team, building Premiere Pro and working, or I guess Premiere now, after the name change. And I also interact almost daily with industry people and working editors and working assistants and all the people that I used to work with to hear how things are working, hear feature requests, hear problems, and try and get all of that work together to continuously make Premiere better and better. Prior to joining Adobe, I was a feature film assistant in Hollywood. Most prominently worked with David Fincher and his team for about 6 years, and other feature films in between those projects. And have a history working in commercials and in broadcast TV before that, and even indie film and trying to be a director. So my career sort of spans a lot of different things on the film industry side over about 20 years.
Yeah, I thought it was important for y'all to know, like, we work at Adobe now, but our previous careers are fully in post-production. So we, along with a lot of people at Adobe, particularly on the video team, bring a lot of that when we're building products. And we really talk directly to people like y'all to get an understanding. So let's first go on to naming what we're talking about today. The elephant in the room. So when we bring something like the AI assistant out, of course, editors here, cool, the drudgery's gone, so I can focus on the work. But assistant editors are hearing an assistant that organizes my footage and builds a first cut is kind of like describing a big chunk of my job. Beyond that, like, I understand we're not unaware of what's going on in the world. Like, I'm not trying to sell you here on Adobe. That's not what this is about. We've been working on the AI assistant across our tools for a while. And when we discovered that, it was going to be imminently launching, one of the first things I said was we should have a session for assistant editors because this is really radically changing. And at first glance, I feel like it can be, oh, cool, cross off that line item. But the reality is that every technological disruption presents a lot of bad stuff, but also a lot of opportunity. And I frankly haven't really seen just a lot of people talking about the opportunity and also what we need to do to advocate so that people are still able to do the work to have the opportunity. So I don't want y'all to think that I set this up and wanted to have an Adobe Live to talk you all into using AI and the AI assistant and, embrace it and everything's happy and there's no problems at all. I want to have an honest conversation. And that's why I brought Ben into it, because he's been in some really interesting scenarios too. So first, I want to show you what the AI assistant actually does today in Premiere specifically. We intentionally focused on things that that have a broad appeal as a utility. So batch renaming clips, transcribing interviews in a bulk, adding markers where you need them, like on every slate or every time action is called, organizing to your structure, syncing and stacking takes, although, this is not production trained yet. So syncing, there's still a little finesse there, and building a string out, like an assembly that you can react to, not just sorted folders. And I think a really interesting use case here is going to be doing like line by lines, which is something that a handful of y'all have asked me for a long time, and now we know how to do it. All right, so let me just show you a really quick demo. This is not a product pitch of Adobe Live, but I wanted to show you if you haven't seen it yet. the assistant can be found up here. It's in this window. It does require an internet connection. So there are still open questions around, data, if you're on a production that's air gapped. AI models that are the kind of AI models that are needed to do this sort of work just can't be done on site locally yet. So here's an example of a command that I did. On the interview sync sequence, it created this sync map for me. Add a marker at each slate or each time action is called, and it gives me an overview of what it did, and then it adds the marker here along with the note when the slates when there's a slate. It can also do project organization, less of an interesting thing for assistant editors because you all have your own particular systems, but I wanted to show you this because you can see it always tells you exactly what it's going to do and what it's done. So I wanted to show you batch renaming clips really quick because I think it's very cool. Rename all the JPEGs to match the visuals. Ben, you were in the test jam, so you might have more experience with this, but in reality, what it should be able to do is go through and read the slates and like batch rename the clips too, right? I don't know how well that works yet, but that is part of what it should be able to do.
Yeah, and I think that there's an aspect there that's worth mentioning to everybody is that, this technology is developing. And so there are components of it that may work really well. There are components of it that you may hit an obstacle. And there might be things that you want it to do that might be really dynamic and deep, and it's not necessarily at a place where it can totally comprehend that yet in one single sweep.
Yeah.
And so part of this is actually exploring with it. And I think this is the most powerful part of it actually is not having us say, hey, here are the things that having AI's help can help you do, but more saying, you know what, that thing usually takes me a really long time and I don't like doing it. Let's see how AI handles it and sort of work with it to figure out where it plugs into your workflow so you can spend less time doing the tedious things that you don't want to do.
Right.
And more time focusing on the things that are actually really important. And so, yeah, I think that theoretically it should be able to do that. It should be able to do things down the line that are even more intelligent. Like, say, if you detect a slate, then label it the slate. But if you don't detect a slate, figure out what the subject of the shot is and label it that instead, so that you get valuable information, even if that initial slate isn't necessarily there. So it doesn't just end up blank because it couldn't process it.
Yeah, and that's really what's interesting about an AI assistant versus just straight up automation is that an AI assistant is agentic, which means it has reasoning. And so it can go through and figure things out for you and then also surface things that you maybe didn't even know you had, or save you time by figuring out the point of the shot. So then you have something to jump off from to then go back to production, script supervisor, whatever, and say, hey, like what happened with XYZ shot? Because I think it's really important when you get all of the dailies and you're trying to reconcile everything to know as quickly as possible that you are in fact missing something. Because if it's still on the camera card, then you only have like moments to save that, for example. So you can see here that it renamed all the clips here by what was in the shot because Premiere also has media intelligence, so it has an awareness of the visuals. So you can imagine like instead of having to go through and rename all these, I did it in bulk. And I know like, depending on your workflow, you might not want that, but it's just an example of something that it's capable of doing today that I think is really an interesting thing. So let's go back to our discussion here. So to be clear, the AI assistant in Premiere, nothing is a black box. Everything is editable or undoable. If it produces a sequence, it's just a regular old sequence. If it makes a cut, you can undo it. Everything is reversible. Nothing happens silently. All right, so moving on there, I want to talk a little bit about how you go from doing this technical work of literally making bins or even setting up macros to make things up to directing it. And what I mean by directing it is directing an AI assistant. The AI assistant is the assistant's assistant. It's not just going to go in and take over everything. It needs to be directed by somebody that knows. So what does an AI edit room look like? Well, we've already handed off a lot of tasks. There's low stakes stuff that's just purely automated, logging, transcription. I know a lot of that stuff is how people learn, but I think about my trajectory, like I learned a lot. I didn't come up through a traditional path personally. I didn't go to film school. I went to a media program and I worked as a solo editor with no assistant for a long time. I never worked in film. So there's a lot of context around film, probably would do me well, but I never got it. But I got other context because technology changed. So I learned a lot about the stuff that then has been automated, but I don't need to transcribe stuff by hand anymore. And then there's the higher stake stuff where the agent performs the work, but you're going to own the spec. You're going to own the QC, turnover, conform. But, it's tedious, but if it's catastrophic, it's real bad. But maybe with the agent, you get to leave at 7 instead of 10. But ultimately, what sticks with you is your judgment and taste. And that's really the big thing. And that's been the trend over the last few years. It's like as technology becomes more capable and computers become more driven by natural language, what is going to be setting you apart is what really has always set apart a good assistant editor or anyone in post-production. You as a person. Reading the room, reading the editor, and prepping all of that. Because the agent can perform a turnover someday. Our assistant cannot do a turnover right now. I do not say that. Maybe it can perform a turnover someday, but it can't be held accountable for one. That is still you. So going into that a little bit, I want Ben and I to talk a little bit about the 18-hour workday and how I see this technology and this shift really happening for the better. I was in dailies. There was a pilot season a long time ago where I ended up having like 5 different shows simultaneously, including 2 pilots. Pilots being, if you're you're all assistant editor, you know what a pilot is. But if you're a newcomer, a pilot is like a test show. They don't really do them anymore, but it's really hard because there is no workflow. So there's a lot of hands-on work. And when I did dailies, I worked all day and then I was on call all night because the dailies technician doing the work would run into issues and then call me, and then I had to figure out how to fix it. And it wrecked my body. It wrecked my mental health. It wrecked me physically to have to do all this stuff that, to be honest, a computer should and can do better. The wake-up call for me that this was not sustainable was when I fell asleep driving to work on the 101. That should never happen. Like, that's ridiculous. There are things that you should let go. Chasing those technical fixes, like they're all high cost to you, but kind of the lowest cost to the work. But then that daytime stuff, that was where I was really set apart. The human problems, the negotiation of workflow calls, knowing how to talk to different producers or different levels of tech savvy. Did you have any experiences with this where you were just like, there has to be a better way then? I think you might be muted.
Sorry, I am muted because I was loading up the YouTube broadcast on the other screen so that I could actually see the chat. So, by the way, if it looks like I'm looking away and distracted, I'm actually trying to follow along with the chat to see if there's anything that we want to pop in and talk about. Yeah, no, I think, I think that the truth is that there's just more and more to do and less time to do it. And I actually see, I think it's Deb Cohen who wrote something about, producers saying they will need assistant editors for less time. I think that that's true regardless of like the AI assistant tools and even just in general, whatever new technology may come around, is that we have less and less time to do things. And I've had less and less time to do things for years. And a lot of my experience is actually trying to figure out how to optimize things that can be optimized. This is without AI, so that I can get time back. I mean, I switched careers because I could never see my family to have dinner.
Yeah.
And it's for anyone out there that might be a first assistant editor, regardless of how many people that you have working with you to help get the movie done, I feel like you always sleep with one eye open because you're worried when something might actually fall apart, that you want to make sure that even if you're not the person that's doing it, because you have a team that's working with you,
Yeah.
you make sure that everything wants to work smoothly the whole time. And yeah, you end up just being sort of overtasked and squeezing more and more things in. And I think that these tools can absolutely help. But I want to go back to one thing that you said earlier of like letting computers do the work that computers are better at doing. That it's a great thing. I've said it in various different sort of flavors as well over, I want to say, the past decade, in trying to figure out ways to optimize and ways for to let the computer do the thing that the computers are designed to do. And in many ways, I'm not trying to make an argument or a case here, but that's what we all do today with NLEs, right? We're not cutting on film anymore. We're not cutting on tape or you're editing tape to tape or doing anything like that. Like NLEs are so much better at doing all of the logistics and the sort of juggling work of all the media and playing it back and optimizing how much faster we can actually edit the story and work with the footage because the computer is doing the things that it's better at doing than we are. And I think this is just another step to that, which means that you can get home to dinner or you don't have to get that call on the weekend. You don't have to change that vacation. And even to the point that Deb Cohen made in the chat, actually have more time if you're an assistant editor and you want to be cutting to juggle the assistant editor task and actually being able to take those cuts and help the editor. Those are all things that I struggled with my entire career, that I honestly never found an answer to.
Yeah, and I'll add, there was this massive series, there's a web series, but it easily could have aired on television. It was at the scale of a small reality show, and it was just me. And the producer, who was non-technical, did a bunch of selects, but I still had to go and really like figure everything out. And it was so stressful unnecessarily because I was my own assistant. I had to assist and edit simultaneously because the client just, it was a show about dogs doing really good, like working dogs doing really good work, and I really wanted to produce a good outcome for them. But their budget was like 1 week per episode, basically, and it was like for everything, from start to finish. And I just think, like, if I had an AI agent that was able to go in and put a bunch of markers down on key moments like that I picked out, like I can go in and say, just find all the interviews and string them together because they were just a mess. Or find all the close-ups of a black lab because there was so much click, drag, click, drag, click, drag. If I could just have it create a sequence and skim through it, because on that show, there was no way I could watch everything myself. I just had to pick some stuff and move forward. And I think that's a reality that a lot of people face as well, where you just end up having to work within the constraints of the budget of the client and then abandon it. And you're always going to have that one shot that you're like, oh, I wish I had gotten that in.
I actually remember working in reality TV, which did not work out well for me. Did a very short run in it, and anyone out there that works on reality, like, you're amazing. I don't know how you do it. But I was editing a show and I went to another editor. It was the first time I was editing an actual hour-long reality TV episode. And I went to another editor on the series and I was like, how do you keep up with this? Because I have to re-edit segment 1 while I'm getting notes on segment 2 and building segment 3, and it all just grows and grows. And I was like, how are you making these using the best takes and the best footage and everything? And they were like, are you kidding me? We get the first thing that works and we move on. We're not editing the best show. We're editing the best one that makes it through. And I was very disappointed by that because I wanted to make the best show, not just make the show that could air.
Yeah.
And those, I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Kylie, but those are the sacrifices that we're all making because of the amount of time that we have. And getting more time to actually make the best show rather than just make the show is what we all want, regardless of whether or not we're using AI.
Totally. Yeah. And somebody said, Binba9, you said when you're a one-woman team or one-man team, sorry, I totally projected. I can see appreciating tools that would streamline assistant editor work, even though we may end up less billable hours. I mean, with the current AI speed, I mean, this is the slowest it's ever going to be, but like organizing a fairly small project takes like 90 seconds. And that's not something that an assistant editor would use, but just as a reference point, that's billable downtime to me, baby. I know the realities of this stuff, but and how hard it is to even get paid for like your system rendering a lot of the time. But I'm not very good at it, but I am a pro multitasker. So I love set something up over here and then move over here and like do email. And while it's running, you can also continue to work in Premiere. So I think that's kind of like the future of co-working. Speaking of which, let's talk about like how to direct an AI. because I wanted to kind of like set up a little bit if you aren't used to or haven't really gotten hands-on with any large language models in particular is what I'm talking about, not generative AI in the sense of imagery and video. My personal interests are largely in large language models and natural language and directing that. So I wanted to give some insights about like, if you're going to get into this, and I really think that I hate to say that any technological disruption is inevitable, but this one really does feel quite inevitable that it's just going to be in everything. So, and it is kind of a skill to learn how to interact with an AI, because it's not, type something and then, something spits out. It's not like an automation where you hit a button. It's a collaboration. So I want to talk a little bit about that, starting with directing the AI well is a skill itself. It's not a button. It's something that you're directing. So learning and getting used to that back and forth and that iteration now, I think, will serve you well. It'll give you the hours back to the work that is more high value, the more high value in the sense that you're the only one that can do it. So basically how it works is you write the brief, describe the outcome in plain language, and then you connect the source media to the creative intent behind it. So you saw I had a bunch of files in there. My AI assistant, I said, do the thing. Give it your structure if you have a structure that it needs to work against, the taxonomy, the naming. In the future, this will be something that's savable and repeatable that you only have to do once. And then you own the final call. So you get a fast draft from the agent or like a string out or whatever, but then you decide whether it's right or not and what right even means. And that's the judgment that I'm talking about that makes you indispensable to post-production overall. So how this works is, and this is usable today in the beta, the clearer the direction, the better the result. You start with leading with the outcome. And then you give it the source and the intent, like, oh, rename all the JPEGs, and then state your conventions, naming, bins, tracks, and then define the scopes and tell it to flag uncertainty. The way our AI assistant and increasingly all the AIs are working is they will flag things that they're uncertain of, whether you ask for it or not. And that is a really key part of this workflow because you don't want it to make decisions on your behalf. And that's really handy because in the project that I showed you, when I organized it, there were a handful of sidecar files from a Nikon camera. And it said, hey, I didn't organize these. And then it said, they're blah, blah, blah sidecar files from Nikon. They don't do anything. You can probably get rid of them, but go ahead and double check. Like, thanks. I actually didn't know what a .nev file was. They keep coming up with new files, okay? So here's an example of a docuseries brief. Organize everything from day 2 and day 3 by interviewee and location. The footage is in the dailies folder. You don't have to tell it that, but it saves it some looking around. Name the clip scene-take with a blue marker where action is called. And then if there are any technical issues, give me the specifics. That's pretty much it. You need to think about AI again as a collaborator, not a vending machine. Because if you think of it like a vending machine, you're going to get mad at it a lot. It's not like Google. It's not like, put a slot machine, really. If you treat it like a collaborator that you're going to iterate with, you get a better output because your mindset is shift. You need to collaborate instead of commanding it. And then explain yourself. It's a language model. So it needs to have things explained to it. And then keep referring back to context and always stay skeptical and don't overtrust the output, but use it as a quicker way to get to the end point.
Kylee, one thing I would throw in there too.
Yep.
Is I think the tendency, because we're all very fluent about working with computers, is to say input, output. What do I give you? What do I get back? And I think it's important to really think about the AI interaction as a conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So the same way that you might talk to somebody that you were working with, that you explain a little bit, then maybe they ask a question back, maybe you give another answer back, maybe you see that there's a point of misclarification and you correct it. Working with the AI agents to get what you want is much more of a fluid conversation rather than, I told you to do XYZ, just do that. And that may seem a little bit counterintuitive, at the beginning because we're all so used to, just like Kylie said, working with search engines and saying, I know now I know how to take the sentence I want to search for and reduce it down into these 4 words and get it exactly what I was looking for. The language model actually wants to work the opposite way. And it actually feels much more fluid, and you can get really good at getting exactly what you want very quickly once you start sort of rearranging your mind to that conversational mindset. But that will definitely help you get what you want quicker by expecting a little bit of conversation. It doesn't mean wasted time, it just means conversation, as opposed to these 3 words are exactly what I want.
Yeah, and that leads into my last bit before I wanted to ask you a couple things, Ben. Prompt engineering isn't your new job. I know I hear from a lot of assistant editors, I don't want to just sit here and type all day. And that's really not the direction that I see it going. Where the frontier models, like, like Fable, which is currently like banned in the US, but where a lot of those newer big models are going is understanding what you mean really on a deep level. So it's getting the vibe more than ever. Like things that used to take fairly careful prompt crafting and prompt engineering, you don't really need that anymore. What you add to it is your judgment and taste and stuff, and then you, as a backbone, you have like all the technical specifications that you set. Every time you go into a show, you learn the workflow, you bring your best practices, you mush all that together. And there's a lot of work that I know, Ben, you've automated. A lot of assistants have like create macros, keyboard shortcuts, all kinds of things to go faster through a lot of the more tedious setup work. But I think that a lot of that sort of thing will be packaged into what are called skills, which are basically a set of instructions for the large language model to use underneath. And then you add your judgment on top of those. And if you're looking for a way to kind of start to level up your thinking around AI, go and learn about skills. There's a lot of documentation online about those, writing in Markdown and things like that. And I think that those are going to be huge for assistants because you already do a form of that. This is just the next iteration. So really being able to articulate your intent in whatever form has always been what's really key. And the machine is now learning to understand you. So you don't have to speak machine. You just have to know what to ask for. So I think that that's really important as well. And I think that that goes beyond just, the NLE. There's a lot you can do right now outside of Premiere or whatever editing system you use to kind of like speed up, amplify your workflow as an assistant. I don't know, Ben, do you have any ideas behind where that could be applied now?
I mean, there are a ton of places. If I'm gonna answer sort of very, very broadly first, and then get into specifics because it's just where my mind is going. I think that the difficult part with where we are with AI right now is that we're seeing 2 extremes, right? Saying I need this done exactly right, as in like rename all my clips to the exact data that's on the slate, or what I know everybody is nervous about, the other extreme of do the entire job for me so that I don't need to be here anymore, right? Which is, or at least someone says that, and that's not what we're talking about. I think there's this middle ground where the power really lies that says, wait a minute, how do I do this really complicated thing that usually takes time or adds up to take time? That's not the immediate simple thing, and it's not the big thing. One of them, as Kylie asked me to think about some various places that I might use it, like before this call. One of the ones that actually popped into my head was doing TRT string outs. If anyone ever has to do TRT string outs, right? Those are things that I hated doing on features. I've done them in every single NLE, and it's just always annoying to have to make the duplicate, take all the pieces from other reels or episode segments and whatever, string them all out, especially if you're on TV and you've got like you're trying to fit a show clock and you've actually got the commercial break segments in there. It's just frustrating and it takes time, even though it's only 5 to 10 minutes every time, it just adds up. And that's totally a simple thing that if you asked an AI agent to do it, you could say, look at my current cuts bin. Like on the features I worked on, we always had an edits folder, and inside of that we had every single reel. So, you might have 9 reels. So you can say, look at all my 9 reels in the current cuts folder and give me a TRT. Now, that sounds like it's the very simple, okay, just do this one thing exactly right. I worked with a lot of editors that cut with the reels, and then sometimes they have selects at the end of the reel just sort of scattered on there, right? Or on features, we usually have leader. We have head and tail leader on there for the purposes of doing turnovers and sending to mix and whatnot, and that all needs to be stripped out. So you could actually define a skill, or you could even just say it in your conversation, saying, I want you to build TRTs of all these sequences, but there's a bunch of extra stuff that's scattered at the end. I want you to ignore that. Or there are leaders on it. I want to make sure that those are trimmed off when you calculate the TRT. And having this conversation is really something that only has to happen once. And now you can say, hey, it's the end of the day. Give me another TRT, give me another TRT. And it does it all for you. You don't have to make the process, go through the process of duplicating all the sequences, assembling all this stuff, setting all the in and out points. It basically can work with you to do what you would essentially have to explain to another person. You explain to the AI the same way. And now it's doing that sort of middle task of like, all right, this is a number of steps that I now don't have to do that I would still be doing anyway. It's not that I don't need a second assistant. It's not replacing them. This was my job. And now I can actually simultaneously field that request that the editor is asking me for, to go do a line breakdown, rather than having to have them either wait longer or me stay later to do the TRT at the end of the day because I got another request coming in. So that's kind of one that jumped out to me. There are a variety of things that you can actually think of, though. Not just within Premiere, but like you said, Kylie, outside too, using LLMs. Someone, Bin Benign asked, there's a little conversation going of actually, why does Premiere AI Assistant actually need to be an LLM? The reason why, you're totally right that AI does not equal chatbot. But the reason why the LLM, or the place where the LLM becomes so powerful, is that it interprets blocks of words and conversations, and it can start to parse them and understand them. So rather than going and say, hey, do this intelligent thing, with the LLM, we can actually say, hey, look at this text and figure out what it is. Maybe it's a conversation between me and the agent, but maybe it's an XML or an EDL. Maybe it's a list of bullet points. It's a bunch of tasks that you need to get done before the end of the day, and you want the LLM to categorize them by how long it expects them to take, so it can help you prioritize which one to do first or second, right? But the cool thing about the LLM is that because it can interpret the text, it can build workflows with you, or you can build workflows with it, right? So you don't need an AI tool that can understand EDL structure. You can work with the LLM to say, hey, this is what the EDL looks like. Here's what I want to look for. Here's how I want to parse it. Here's what I want to do. And it can actually do that with you in real time. So a great example that I wish I had was being able to give the LLM a spreadsheet or a document of all of my final visual effects shots of that current day, which changes day to day, and compare that to an EDL or an XML of the sequence, and make sure that there are no visual effects IDs in the sequence that are not the final versions in the XML spreadsheet. That's the type of thing that takes hours. And it's the type of thing that I wrote Python scripts for. Having AI do it once the Python scripts is done is no different from actually the Python script running. It all just happens in like very, very quick time. But here, I didn't have to learn how to write Python in order to have the AI help me do this. And then, like you said, Kylie, it becomes a very specific skill. You can have multiple skills with AI. So you can say, I have a skill for interpreting EDLs or XMLs, or I have a skill for looking at this script or whatever. And then once you get in that zone, here's what we're doing. And it sort of has these shortcuts for how to approach it. And then after that initial sort of set is defined, you can just do that over and over and over, and it can just help you out. So
Yeah, and I think we're like a Python script and an AI assistant for like VFX, like polls or turnovers or anything like that. Where it differs is that if it does find an issue, it can reason through it and maybe try to fix it for you or suggest like something. Like I remember I was on a pilot in New Mexico and I was the go-between for polls, and I kept getting EDLs that were wrong, and I had to manually go in and like fix little things.
mhm.
And that's just not valuable work. It was work that I was doing at 8 p.m. in my hotel room too.
I
Like
was
that.
working on a really big feature where we built an entire pipeline with photochem in order to do certain pulls.
Yeah.
Like if we wanted to do a full frame pull, we had to export an ALE, and then there was a automated system for emailing that ALE, and it would automatically submit the polls and then deliver the Aspera link to us, and it was super awesome. But it turns out that the way that their system was built, and I was actually using Avid on that feature, the way that their system was built and the way Avid was designed, when you export the ALE, the name field, which is the one field that you actually can't change in an Avid bin when you export an ALE, needed to be called like file name or something like that, right? It needed something different.
Yeah.
And I had to write a Python script so that I didn't have to go in every single time I did one of these polls and manually open it up in a text editor and change this field. So I wrote a Python script that would just, you could just drag the ALE to, and it would modify it before it pushed it up to the
Yeah, exactly.
system. I'm not expecting everyone, I would encourage everybody to, but I'm not expecting every assistant editor to go and start learning Python and other languages and scripting and, all kinds of web stuff if that's what, you might need to. With the LLMs and the agents, they can do it, and they have this whole back end to be able to say, oh, I already know Python. All right, I understand it because I'm an LLM. So I can do that for you. I don't even need to tell you that I'm using Python. I just did the thing.
I just wrote a little script. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you're one of the most like automation forward assistants that I think I've ever met. Like, I think a lot of people say, oh, you're going to automate yourself out of a job. And you've been like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the truth is, if I could, I never felt, and there was some chat about this, and there was some conversation about this in the chat about like, Premiere shows having assistant editors. I mean, I've probably worked on more Premiere features than I have Avid features, although I've worked on a lot of both. And no, we do big features in Premiere. But is this scope of like, well, wait a minute, does this mean that people are gonna, because of the introduction of these tools, that the optimization is going to like require us less, or like, not have to do as much or whatever? And my entire time, I guess, first of all, I've never felt that my relationship with the editor and the director and the editorial team wasn't one where I was contributing to the movie as an assistant editor only because I could push the buttons. And so what was actually getting in the way of me contributing more was the amount of time it took to push the buttons. And I think a lot of editors would actually say the same thing. Like, if you could do the whole Minority Report editing, or you could somehow think and just tell the NLE what to do without having to click all the buttons to do it, that we would all want that, because you would move faster. You would spend more time making creative decisions and less time implementing those creative decisions. I think, Kylee, we were talking the other day, and I said this, where I think most people agree that a movie, a show, any kind of creative project is never really done. You just sort of run out of time before you need to release it. And I've worked with a number of directors that if they could, they would work on the movie for another 2 years, or the project, whatever, right? It has to get out into the world at some point. And so however we can create more time within that window to do the creative rather than the button clicking, that is absolutely what I've always wanted to do. And I never felt like I was coding myself out of a job. I felt like I was always optimizing my ability to be more present with the things that actually mattered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that for sure. I feel that there were a lot of times when I worked in dailies where I was looking through a bunch of metadata to try to find one little thing that was wrong. And when I was stuck doing that, like, there was a lot of other things going on, meetings, workflow calls. And instead I'm like, sorry, I can't go. I've got to look through every single clip in this bin. And there's just a lot of those moments that I think are lost when you are kind of in charge of managing the technology behind the edit. So if you can work through that stuff faster and then find, like, stay ahead of your editor and things like that, I think it's so valuable to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that as much as these tools may also be accessible to the editor, when you have an editor assistant or assisting team relationship, however big or small the team is, I can't personally think of the editors that I know saying, I don't need an assistant anymore. I think that they may find value in some of the things that the AI abilities can deliver to them as well, so that they can work more fluidly. But a lot of the editors I know would probably say, hey, can't you have AI get that to me more quickly? But I still want you to do it. I don't want to stop what I'm doing in order to do the assistant editor task. I'm just happy that you can get it to me in 5 minutes rather than 20.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into the next topic, which is a little bit spicy. How is the new tech going to continue to change how we work? But very critically, how does the next generation learn? Because a lot of that, if you're a post PA or, you know, a third or second assistant, if you're on a larger feature, or a night assistant, like all these different things where a lot of this more like tedious technical work would be done. If logging, transcribing, turnovers taught us the craft or the politics, then automating them can remove that rung from the ladder. So, and I think that's a really a really important topic to talk about. Like what is that entry point for people if the entry point is sort of like not that stuff anymore? Because I think those tasks teach you a lot, but the lasting part isn't like learning the keystrokes and learning like this bin goes here, this bin goes here, but it's learning like the why behind it, and what a specific editor wants, what a post facility wants. Because you can't brief or you can't correct what you can't understand. So then the craft knowledge matters a lot more. So then that really leads into like how do we make sure that there is room for this next generation, and what does that look like? And then you kind of went through the film transition and the digital transition. And I'm sure a lot of those entry level roles kind of disappeared or evolved. Have you put thought to this question?
I will right now.
Uh,
Well, I mean, we were talking about some of this the other day too, in our lead up to this, and there was actually a great point that someone made in the chat about, which is what we talked about the other day, Kylie, of people, watching their footage and reviewing it, and some of the optimizations that these AI tools can provide, sort of taking away from people's ability to like do things like review footage. And I actually said to Kylie, "Oh yeah, that I remember this exact same transition happening when we switched away from tape-based media when we were shooting shows on tape to digital acquisition because I actually know I worked with an editor who was specifically hired because she was a really good story editor, and she was really good at transcribing the footage while it was logged and capturing, or while it was capturing, I guess it was already logged. So and figuring out how the story should be assembled then. So by the end of a capture session, she had a full transcription. I don't know how she did that without having to rewind, and knew how she was going to start building the story, right? Like that was super valuable. Digital completely changed her life because she didn't have to do that anymore. I think the truth is that you can't you can't make decisions without reviewing the footage. And so I don't think anyone's gonna, I mean, I could be totally wrong about this, but I don't think that the concept of that is going to go away. We may be reviewing it differently, but I think that in order to know that you're editing the story that is the best story that's there and the story you want to tell, you have to review the footage anyway. The way that I look at this stuff is that I tend to think that really the place that we start making decisions is after the first sort of very rough assembly or string out or whatever you want to call it. We may make decisions along the way of building that, but we're all trying to get to that first point in the initial part of the project building, where we can start reacting.
yeah.
And that these tools are going to help us get to the reaction much more quickly and evaluate the alternatives in a much more precise way. Um, when it comes to what's on this slide and sort of the question of like
How do we pass the knowledge?
yeah, and how do we grow and how do we sort of like keep the concepts of what we do without the specific button presses or just the hey, this is ABC, just write it down on a piece of paper and do it. I know some people that work that way. I know some people that are like, this is my job, this is what I have to do, these are the steps, and as long as I follow the steps, I get the job done. I find the people that end up being much more empowered are the people that conceptually understand why they're doing those button presses and have grown past the what I need to do to understanding how the system works and why in order to achieve the final goal of whatever it is, whether it's technical or whether it's creative. And so I I guess I don't have a really
I don't
defined answer,
I don't
but
think anybody does. I think that's why we're
yeah,
having this discussion. Because
yeah. I think that my feeling is that uh, it ends up coming down to like trusted relationships and the people that you work with, and that like I mean I've been working on Premiere since it was a very much older product than it is right now when I was in college. Right. And I taught myself Avid when I moved to Hollywood, or to LA, because I was like, well, that's what Hollywood uses, and I want to work on those movies, so I better like teach myself. But I didn't learn anything from pressing the buttons. I learned from working with people and figuring out what we were trying to make.
yeah,
And I think that that's ultimately going to stay the same. Is that it's the same way that when you moved from like a Steenbeck and editing film to moving to tape decks to moving to NLEs, well, this is another migration, but the concepts of what we're building are deeper than that.
mhm,
And for the people that may consider themselves like, like a one-man band or like a Predator type of situation, um, you are going to have your own taste and your own values and your own judgment of what you're trying to create. And whether that's clicking a button or asking an AI agent to do it, it's going to help you get there. And for the people that are working on larger teams, you're all still going to work together and you're going to figure out what those nuances are that are independent of the tool.
right. Because I think like right now, at any given moment, that if you're in it and you're like, this is my job right now, how are other people going to climb the ladder when it's changing so much? But then I look at some of these big films that have come out from directors who grew up on YouTube and didn't really go to a traditional media or film school. And that's part of the evolution is, taking people like that, taking young people seriously when they get started in, prosumer tools, and then maybe they start getting into Premiere and they aren't using it perfectly, but they're figuring it out. Those skills should transfer. And I think that when I was trying to get into the industry, there was a lot of kind of like gatekeeping around, well, you haven't done this specific thing, but it's really shifted a lot. And I think that
Yeah,
the expectations and the overall like path has to be less, it needs fewer guardrails.
yeah,
Great assistant editors, great storytellers, great editors come from all over. And just because they haven't, done their time on the midnight shift doesn't mean they don't know things. That isn't really the thing that would set them apart. It's the taste and judgment and being able to be a person that you want to be around.
exactly.
You're bringing things to the table.
And
I
it's
think,
funny because once I stopped rambling and I reread the slide and it says, the honest answer was learning why the project was built a certain way and what footage matters and this and that. I think that there's we are the industry, what regardless of what corner of the industry you work in or you're from, the industry has some very deep roots now of how it works and the way you do things and why you do things. And I think that there's a tendency to say, oh, well, AI will handle it, so that's not important anymore. I don't think that's true at all, right? Like just because you're using AI as opposed to doing it manually doesn't mean you're not going to organize things.
right.
It may help you, but the foundation and the backbones for how this stuff works doesn't change because all of that stuff is in place because it helps us get to those creative launching points. And that's not going to change.
Yeah. So that goes into my next slide really quick, really well. Like another spicy take. Like when we talk about this stuff, like, oh, there will always be this, like, whatever. Like there are two sides to this. The hopeful, optimistic version is that, you learn craft more directly. You get to level up your role without burning to the ground a lot better. The capitalist hellscape version is that we don't need assistance anymore, or the AI can just cut it. And I think both of those things are going to happen in some way because that's what's happened with every technological change back from the very beginning. If you look at, the advent of the car, all the people that were chauffeurs or, rode horses, they were mad. They were big mad. the lamplighters, they had a huge like movement behind them when automatic street lamps became a thing. Like this is a repeated pattern. So I'm not going to say, oh, nothing will change. Everything's fine. But it's also really challenging to me because it's something that like with the next generation and giving people tools and stuff like Adobe, that's what we can do, but we can't change how the market is going to react. So, but what I can do is say, hey, can we do this webinar and like raise the question, like who's advocating for this role? Who's advocating for post-production and for Hollywood? There's a huge, incredible movement to bring production back to LA, for example. And I think that that's really important. And that is part of this too. Like so many people specifically in LA, where, you know, a lot of assistant editors are, which is why I keep referring to it, but all over, are really struggling with the job market, the political climate, economic climate. Like there's a lot of stuff swirling that makes all this feel worse. And also, I mean, not even just in Hollywood, tech company, like all companies, I've been laid off twice as an editor and not. So I know the reality of this situation, but I'm gonna mention I've seen this kind of role fight before. I mentioned I was at a major studio, and there was a lot of pushback from productions to have a DIT on set. The DIT is not a media wrangler. They are the beholder of the look of the show on you know, higher end TV and film. They collaborate with the DP in real time. And when there were more tools to automate this stuff, to just be like, oh, just put a LED on it, or you know, automated color tools, and we could just bring it through the edit. We at the studio were the ones advocating for the DIT and why it's important, because it maintains the creative intent of the DP all the way through, and nothing changes through that. So the lesson from that is that this role, it survives when it's redefined around the human side of it, and when people advocate for it. And if it's seen as deferrable, it's cut. So ultimately, this tool does nothing without people behind it that can judge it and then own the result. And those are the people that use the software. We're making software for creative professionals, not for robots.
And actually, since you said that, at the risk of jumping in with a hot take, I do want to address something that David Hartley just wrote down at the bottom of the chat, because I think it's important. I think that he makes a comment saying that developers being developers want to build an AI tool to know how it works and why. I'm paraphrasing and skipping some things here. It's like the atom bomb. The scientist wants to see if they could for the sake of science, not necessarily doing it for the destruction. I can't speak for everybody. I can't even necessarily speak for all different corners of Adobe, but I can tell you that there is a very distinct difference between research to see what tools may be capable of doing versus the tools that are built and released. And just like what Kylee said, we're trying to think about all this stuff and the value that it has and how it gets put into people's hands in order to be valuable and helpful and carry forward the ability to create.
Yeah.
We're not saying, hey, let's throw a bunch of stuff into Premiere or whatever platform it may be included on and just see what AI does to the world. And so the hot take part of this is that, you know, maybe me speaking alone here, but I don't want to low prop anyone else into it. I disagree with you that this is experimentation for experimentation's sake to see what happens. It is much more, there are elements of research there, but this is much more deliberate. We're trying to provide tools that allow you to take a bigger step forward with every step you take, not just blow things up because it's innovative.
Yeah, and I think that that's true of Adobe. Like we're trying to develop in a way. I'm not gonna say that there aren't people out there that are trying to make an AI tool to do literally anything and everything, and there aren't bad actors out there. Of course there are. Like it's the internet. Have you met people? But I think that it's really gonna be challenging to ever make an AI that thinks like a human editor because it's subjective. And I've done a lot of study about this, about how AI impacts storytelling, the rejection, and also just the templatization of stories. I've done like doctoral research on these things, and then at my grad program as well. And it all kind of aligns into the large language model is trained on essentially tropes. And it can give you really interesting, unexpected things. But ultimately, the subjectivity of storytelling is what makes storytelling interesting. So I think it's always going to be something that's just interesting to collaborate with. And there will be people that just use it straight up, because even today, without AI, people produce fairly formulaic things and they have a very specific way of doing it and they don't care about the craft. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the craft people. And I think that it'll be weird and interesting to see that. But I think that us as humans, we always kind of think highly of ourselves. So we're always going to be like, nah, I could do that better.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times that's true, and whether or not we think that or whether or not it's actually true, but like taste comes into play.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the taste of the person that's receiving the content and deciding whether or not they want to keep watching it. It's also the taste that went into building it. And there was a comment earlier that may have also been from David, but I can't remember, where someone said ultimately the AI will become the editor. I don't agree with that. AI will be able to edit, sure. But the editor is actually the person that is bringing taste and scope of how the storytelling is created to the project, to the story, not just the person that assembles it. Anybody can assemble some footage together. That role may sort of morph. More people may become editors and apply in different ways, but I don't think the AI will become the editor, even when it can edit.
Yeah. Yeah. And just in the last 3 minutes, I want to just kind of wrap this up with kind of where we're thinking, where we're heading, because we were talking about like the future and what we see this. And at Adobe, our video teams are made up of a lot of subject matter experts that come from the video industry, from the trenches, a lot of us from a lot of really interesting places. And we have a lot of heated discussions around this, like, where do we want this to show up? And so we get a lot, I talk to a lot of editors about what they want us to add. As an assistant editor, we want to know what you want too. So some things that I've been thinking about are versioning at scale. Like, I hate doing versions because I inevitably mess one up. It's easier for me to just go through and be like, yes, yes, yes. But when I have to do it, over. Cut downs to an extent. I mean, this would be pretty utility focused. And then stakeholder feedback. Reconciling the messy notes against a cut that maybe has evolved. So things like that, we're thinking about where can we eliminate time. And today in beta, there's an AI assistant in Premiere, but also Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, and Frame.io. And we're working on bringing one to After Effects as well. So I think that once you get good at directing an agent in general, then the skill is going to carry over, because ultimately the takeaway is that you're in the driver's seat, you're verifying, and you're deciding. You're directing the scope. The output's always, use it or not. You make the decisions. So we really need you to just like try it, or, consider it, try a different AI tool, just see what you think. And if you're not comfortable with that, totally fine. But please try to join us in advocating for what the industry needs, how the industry needs to evolve to reset expectations around these roles, so that we're set up for success for younger people coming up and developing all of this stuff as well. I also say, like, I think that when you talk to people at Adobe, you see that we all really care. And we are super thoughtful about all this. So we're always willing to have a conversation, like a real conversation in good faith, because not everything is a good idea. And I know that this is incredibly disruptive at a very challenging time. So feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'm happy to have a conversation. And if you try it, let me know what you think. If you don't want to, that's fine too. If you have major issues with this, I'm interested in that too. Like I said, I'm studying all this also in my personal time. But ultimately, I think it's a really interesting place we are at right now, because we're kind of being forced into doing something whether we want it all to or not. And I'm thinking about buying a litter box with AI for Oh my God. It's everywhere.
I mean,
All
I
think
will
about
say I
it.
was I was so frustrated in sort of like the early ChatGPT days where like literally everything was like, oh, well, let's see what ChatGPT says, or let's run that through ChatGPT, see if it has any revisions. I was like, we are capable people. You don't need to rely on this backbone, right? And I think that while I do still agree with that statement of like, you don't need to cede your humanity just because the tool exists, I have started to really recognize, especially with the more dynamic LLM incorporation into things like Premiere, how that can really be leveraged. And I would encourage everybody, just like Kylie is saying, to explore, maybe think about it from, all right, what's that thing that frustrates me every day? Could I get the LLM to do that? As opposed to, all right, let me go experiment with the LLM and see how it's going to replace me. Don't, it's that I don't, that's not the right way to approach it. It's also not how it's being incorporated. So I would think about it from there and allow yourself to discover whether or not it really is sort of like a partner that helps you move forward into what you want to do. That's what I've found in many different scopes of using LLMs in a variety of different places.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time. Thank you all for joining us. If you didn't see at the beginning of this session, I did do a demo of the AI assistant. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you can also see like a 6-minute long video. And then if you watch the replay of this, which will be available soon, then you can go back and see that demo if you missed it at the beginning. We wanted to really be having an honest conversation because I feel like so much about AI stuff in all of our products is look at what it can do, it's perfect, and not about like what does this mean for like at an existential level. So I really appreciate you all coming here. Thank you, Ben, for joining and adding a lot of great stuff to our conversation. And if you yes, you can try it. If you're interested, you can try it. It's in public beta now. You can just download the beta and give it a whirl. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Adobe Live.